The morning sun peeked through the blinds as Andre Wilson adjusted his tie in the mirror. Today was just another day in court for him, or so he thought. As one of the few black attorneys in the small city of Westbrook, Andre had grown used to the subtle looks and whispers. But he had earned his place through years of hard work, late-night studying, and a genuine passion for justice. "Hey, don't forget your lunch," called his wife Tanya from the kitchen. Their modest home buzzed with morning activity as their 2 children got ready for school. "Thanks, honey. I shouldn't be too late today. Just a routine traffic hearing and then meeting with a new client at 3. Andre kissed her goodbye, grabbed his briefcase, and headed out. The courthouse stood tall in downtown Westbrook, its stone steps worn from years of people seeking justice or facing judgment. Andre climbed them with practiced ease, nodding to the security guards he knew by name. "Morning, Andre," called the clerk at the front desk. "Courtroom 3 today." Andre smiled and made his way through the familiar hallways. He had a simple case, a disputed speeding ticket for a client who couldn't attend. Nothing that should take more than 20 minutes. What Andre didn't know was that Officer Richard Kellerman was having a particularly bad day. Known among the local black community as someone to avoid, Kellerman had a reputation for attitude adjustments during traffic stops involving minorities. Official complaints somehow disappeared from his record, and fellow officers turned a blind eye to his behavior. Andre settled into his seat in the nearly empty courtroom, reviewing his notes one last time. When Officer Kellerman entered, Andre felt the temperature in the room drop. The officer's cold blue eyes swept over him with undisguised contempt. "All rise," announced the bailiff as Judge Henderson entered. The proceedings began routinely enough. Andre presented his client's case clearly and professionally, arguing that the speed trap was improperly marked according to state guidelines. "Your Honor, if I may submit these photographs showing the positioning of the signs," Andre said, approaching the bench. As he returned to his seat, he heard Kellerman mutter under his breath, "Uppity lawyer thinks he knows the law better than those who enforce it." Andre stiffened but kept his composure. He'd learned long ago that reacting only gave men like Kellerman satisfaction. Judge Henderson, who hadn't heard the comment, ruled in Andre's favor, dismissing the ticket. "The court finds insufficient evidence to uphold this citation. Case dismissed." As Andre gathered his papers, Officer Kellerman's voice cut through the quiet courtroom. "Guess we know why you got this case thrown out." Same skin color as the judge, Andre froze. Judge Henderson, who was indeed black, had already left through his chamber door. "Excuse me?" Andre turned to face the officer. "You heard me," Kellerman said, loud enough for the court reporter and bailiff to hear. "You people always stick together." The bailiff looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The court reporter suddenly became very interested in her equipment. "Officer, that comment was inappropriate and unprofessional," Andre said evenly, maintaining his dignity despite the burning anger rising in his chest. "What are you going to do about it, counselor?" Kellerman stepped closer, invading Andre's personal space. "File a complaint? Go ahead. See where that gets you in this town." Andre picked up his briefcase. "This conversation is over." "Good day, officer." As Andre walked out into the hallway, he heard footsteps behind him. He quickened his pace, but before he could reach the main corridor, a hand grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. "We're not done talking," Kellerman growled, pushing Andre against the wall. "Take your hands off me," Andre said firmly. "There are cameras everywhere," Kellerman smirked. "Not in this hallway. Budget cuts, remember? They've been scheduled for repair for months." The first blow caught Andre by surprise, a quick jab to his stomach that doubled him over. His briefcase clattered to the floor, papers spilling across the polished tiles. "That's for making me look bad in there," Kellerman hissed. "Know your place." Andre tried to straighten up to defend himself, but a second blow, this time to his ribs, sent shockwaves of pain through his body. "Stop," Andre gasped. "This is assault on an officer of the court." "Your word against mine," Kellerman replied, delivering a final shove that sent Andre sprawling. "And we both know whose word counts more around here." The officer straightened his uniform and walked away, leaving Andre on the floor, struggling to breathe through the pain. For several minutes, Andre remained there, the cool floor against his cheek, a stark contrast to the hot shame and anger pulsing through him. Finally, he gathered his scattered papers with shaking hands and pulled himself to his feet. No one had witnessed the assault. The hallway remained empty, and Andre knew he had a choice to make. report it and face potential retaliation, or stay silent like so many others had before him. In the men's room, Andre splashed cold water on his face and examined himself in the mirror. His brown skin was already showing the beginnings of bruises. His crisp white shirt had come untucked and there was a small tear in his suit jacket. "You okay in there?" It was Luis, one of the janitors who had worked at the courthouse for decades. Andre quickly straightened his clothes. "I'm fine, Luis, thanks." But Luis's experienced eyes took in the scene. The disheveled appearance, the careful way Andre was holding his side, the tight lines of pain around his eyes. "Don't look fine to me," Luis said quietly. "Was it Kellerman?" Andre's surprised look was answer enough. "He's done this before," Luis continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "To people who can't fight back. People who won't be believed." Andre gripped the edge of the sink. "How do you know?" "I clean these halls every day. I see things, hear things." Luis shook his head. "Nothing ever happens to him, though. Protected, you know." Andre nodded slowly. "I know, and what will you do?" Luis asked. It was the question Andre had been asking himself. As an attorney, he believed in the system, had to believe in it. But he also knew its flaws, its biases, the way it could be manipulated by those with power and privilege. "I'll do what I always tell my clients to do," Andre finally said. "Document everything and follow proper channels." Luis looked skeptical. "Good luck with that." Back in his office, Andre carefully photographed his injuries before they could fade. He wrote down every detail of the encounter while it was fresh in his mind. Then he called his next client to reschedule. "Something's come up," he explained. "An urgent matter I need to address." That night at home, Tanya gasped when Andre removed his shirt, revealing the dark bruises forming on his ribs and abdomen. "Who did this to you?" she demanded, eyes flashing with anger and concern. Andre told her everything as she gently applied ice to his injuries. "You need to report him," she said firmly. "He can't get away with this." "I know," Andre agreed. "But we need to be smart about it. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been hurt by him and couldn't speak up." Their children were thankfully already asleep, sparing Andre from having to explain to his son and daughter why someone would hurt their father, simply because of the color of his skin. That night, as pain kept him awake, Andre stared at the ceiling and made a promise to himself. This wouldn't be swept under the rug. Officer Kellerman had picked the wrong person to intimidate. Andre had spent his entire career fighting for others. Now he would fight for himself, and for everyone else who had suffered silently. What he didn't know then was that this moment would change, not only his life, but the very system he had both served and struggled against. The path ahead would be long and difficult, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But as Andre finally drifted into uneasy sleep, something had been set in motion, something that would eventually bring him face to face with his attacker again. But under very different circumstances. The bruises would heal, but Andre's determination only grew stronger. In his mind, he began planning his next steps, unaware that this ugly incident would become the catalyst for a journey that would transform not just his career, but the entire justice system in Westbrook. The morning after the attack, Andre woke up with pain shooting through his ribs at the slightest movement. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the storm of emotions churning inside him. Anger, humiliation, and a deep sense of injustice that kept him awake most of the night. "You should see a doctor," Tanya urged as she helped him button his shirt, his own movements too painful. "I will," Andre promised. "But first I need to file the report while everything is still fresh." Every step to his car felt like a small battle, but Andre was determined. He had spent years telling clients to trust the system, to follow proper procedures. Now it was time to put his own advice into practice. At the police station, the desk sergeant's expression changed subtly when Andre explained why he was there. "You want to file a complaint against Officer Kellerman?" he repeated, eyes narrowing slightly. "That's right," Andre confirmed, standing straight despite the pain in his side. "He assaulted me yesterday in the courthouse after my hearing." The sergeant pushed a form across the desk with obvious reluctance. "Fill this out. Someone will contact you." As Andre completed the paperwork, he noticed officers glancing his way, their whispered conversations stopping whenever he looked up. The thin blue line was already forming. "Here you go," Andre said, sliding the completed form back. I'd like a copy for my records, the sergeant frowned. We don't usually. I'm aware of department policy, Andre interrupted politely but firmly. All complainants are entitled to a receipt and copy of their initial report. I'd like mine now, please. After leaving the station with his copy safely tucked in his briefcase, Andre drove to Westbrook Memorial Hospital. The emergency room was busy, but eventually, a young doctor examined him. 2 bruised ribs, she confirmed after looking at his x-rays. Nothing broken, fortunately. They'll heal on their own with rest, but it'll be painful for a few weeks. I need the medical report, Andre explained. It's for a case. The doctor's eyes showed understanding. I'll make sure it's detailed. 2 weeks passed with no word about his complaint. Andre called the Internal Affairs office daily, only to be told his case was under review. Meanwhile, he dove into research, pulling public records requests for any previous complaints against Officer Kellerman. What he found disturbed but didn't surprise him. Over 7 years, Kellerman had accumulated 16 complaints: excessive force, racial profiling, verbal abuse. All had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence or officer discretion. One evening, as Andre worked late in his office, a knock on the door startled him. "Come in," he called, and was surprised to see Luis, the courthouse janitor. "Sorry to bother you," Luis said, hat in hand. "I heard you filed a complaint against Kellerman." Andre nodded. "I did." Luis glanced nervously at the open door, then closed it gently. "There's something you should know. You're not the first lawyer he's done this to." Andre leaned forward. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, there was this public defender, a woman named Grace Chen. She embarrassed Kellerman in court, got evidence thrown out in a drug case. After the hearing, he caught her alone in the parking garage. Andre felt his stomach tighten. "What happened?" "She showed up at work the next day with a black eye, said she fell, but I saw them arguing in the garage that night when I was taking out trash. 2 weeks later, she transferred to another county." "Did she ever report it?" Luis shook his head. "Started to, then stopped. Rumor was someone talked to her about her career prospects." Andre wrote down the details in Grace Chen's name. "Thank you for telling me this, Luis. Would you be willing to make a statement if needed?" Fear flashed across the older man's face. "I've got 3 years until retirement, man. I can't." "I understand," Andre said gently. "But if things change, my door is always open." After Luis left, Andre sat in the quiet of his office, thinking. The system was designed to protect itself, to close ranks against outsiders. If he was going to get justice, he needed more than just his word against Kellerman's. The next morning, Andre received a call from Captain Reynolds of Internal Affairs. "Mr. Wilson, we've reviewed your complaint against Officer Kellerman." "And?" Andre prompted when the captain paused. "We find insufficient evidence to proceed with disciplinary action. Officer Kellerman denies any physical altercation occurred, and there were no witnesses or camera footage to corroborate your claims." Though expected, the dismissal still stung. "Captain, I submitted medical records documenting my injuries, which could have been sustained in any number of ways," Reynolds countered smoothly. "Without corroborating evidence, we can't move forward." After hanging up, Andre sat quietly, letting the anger wash through him. This was exactly how the system silenced victims, by demanding impossible standards of proof for actions deliberately committed where no one could see. That afternoon, his law partner David knocked on his office door. "Got a minute?" Andre waved him in. David had been his friend since law school, one of the few white attorneys who seemed to truly understand the additional barriers Andre faced. "I heard about the Kellerman situation," David said, closing the door behind him. "Word gets around." "They dismissed it," Andre said. "No surprise there." David sighed. "That's not all. The DA's office called. They're reviewing which defense attorneys they'll work with on plea deals going forward. Your name came up." "Retaliation already?" Andre shook his head. "That was fast." "It's not just that," David continued, looking uncomfortable. "Some of our corporate clients are nervous. Chambers called me asking if this situation might affect our ability to handle their cases. The implication was clear. Andre's pursuit of justice against one cop was threatening the firm's bottom line. What do you want me to do, David? Drop it? Pretend it never happened? I'm not saying that, David replied quickly. Just be careful. This could affect more than just you. After David left, Andre stared out his window at the courthouse across the street. The same building where he'd pledged to uphold justice, where he'd fought for his clients, and where he'd been beaten for daring to succeed as a black man. That evening he told Tanya about the complaint being dismissed and the subtle warnings from his own firm. "What are you going to do?" she asked as they sat on their back porch, watching their children play in the yard. "I'm not giving up," Andre said firmly. "But I need to be smart about this. It's bigger than just Kellerman now." The next day, Andre visited 3 local civil rights attorneys. All expressed sympathy, but none would take his case. "The blue wall is real," explained one, an older woman who had fought police brutality cases for decades. "And in a small city like Westbrook, where the police union controls which judges get endorsed in elections, it's nearly impossible." But on his 4th try, Andre found someone willing to listen. Anthony Wright had built his career taking on difficult cases representing people whom society had written off. "I can't promise we'll win," Anthony warned after hearing Andre's story. "But I can promise we'll make enough noise that they can't ignore us." With Anthony's help, Andre filed a civil rights lawsuit against Officer Kellerman, the police department, and the city. The local paper ran a small story buried on page 6. The police union issued a statement defending Kellerman and questioning Andre's motives. Then came the threats. First phone calls in the middle of the night, then a brick through his office window. Someone spray-painted a racial slur on his car while it was parked outside the courthouse. "Maybe we should move," Tanya suggested one night after tucking their frightened children into bed. "Start fresh somewhere else." Andre looked at his wife's worried face and felt a moment of doubt. Was he putting his family at risk for a principle? Was justice worth this price? Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Grace Chen, the public defender Luis had mentioned. "I heard about your lawsuit," she said without preamble. "I've been following it online." "Luis told me what happened to you," Andre replied. "I'm sorry." There was a long pause. "I should have fought harder, spoken up. Maybe if I had, you wouldn't have been hurt." "It's not your fault," Andre assured her. "The system was stacked against you." "It still is," Grace said. "But maybe it's time to stack it back." Another pause. "I'm willing to testify about what Kellerman did to me." After hanging up, Andre turned to Tanya, new determination in his eyes. "We're not moving. We're not running. This is our home, and we're going to fight to make it better." Over the next few weeks, more people came forward. A college student who claimed Kellerman had planted evidence. A retired teacher who had witnessed him using excessive force during a traffic stop. A former rookie officer who had been pushed out of the department after reporting Kellerman's misconduct. What had started as one man's fight for personal justice was growing into something larger. A spotlight on systemic problems that had festered for years in Westbrook's police department. The lawsuit moved slowly through the courts, facing delay tactics and procedural objections at every turn. But each obstacle only strengthened Andre's resolve. He began documenting patterns of misconduct beyond just Kellerman, building a case that the department had fostered a culture of impunity. 6 months after filing the lawsuit, Andre received a call from a reporter at the Washington Post. "We've been investigating police misconduct in small cities across the country," she explained. "Your case caught our attention." The resulting front-page story brought national attention to Westbrook. Civil rights organizations offered support. The Department of Justice announced it would review the police department's patterns and practices. The city, suddenly facing unwelcome scrutiny, approached Andre with a settlement offer, a substantial sum of money in exchange for dropping the lawsuit and signing a non-disclosure agreement. "Take it," advised David. "It's a win. You've made your point." But Andre wasn't interested in money or personal vindication anymore. "This was never just about me," he told his partner. "It's about changing a broken system." He rejected the offer and pressed forward with the lawsuit. The case had become his mission, consuming his time and energy, reshaping his career from corporate law to civil rights advocacy. 1 year after the attack in the courthouse hallway, Andre stood on the steps of that same building, surrounded by supporters, as a judge denied the city's motion to dismiss his case. It would proceed to trial. Officer Kellerman had been quietly transferred to desk duty, not fired, but no longer patrolling the streets. It was a small victory, but an important one. As Andre walked back to his office that afternoon, he realized something had changed within him. The pain and humiliation of that day had transformed into purpose. In fighting for justice in his own case, he had found a new calling, using his legal skills to help others who had been silenced by the same system. What he didn't know then was that this path would eventually lead him to a position where he could effect change from within, that the system he was fighting would one day be his to reshape. But that transformation was still years away, requiring patience, strategy, and unwavering determination in the face of powerful opposition. 3 years passed like a slow-moving river, each day flowing into the next as Andre's case wound its way through the legal system. What had started as a personal quest for justice had evolved into something much larger, a movement that was slowly changing Westbrook from the inside out. The morning of the trial's final arguments dawned crisp and clear. Andre straightened his tie as he stood before the courthouse, the same building where Officer Kellerman had attacked him all those years ago. The memory no longer brought pain or fear, just a steady resolve. "Ready?" asked Anthony Wright, who had become more than just Andre's attorney. He was now a friend and mentor. Andre nodded. "Let's finish this." Inside, the courtroom was packed. The case had drawn attention far beyond Westbrook, with civil rights activists, community members, and reporters filling every available seat. Officer Kellerman sat at the defense table, his face a mask of indifference, though Andre noticed how his fingers drummed nervously on the tabletop. During the 3-week trial, witness after witness had come forward, not just those directly affected by Kellerman, but fellow officers who had finally broken their silence about the culture of cover-ups and intimidation within the department. The jury's deliberation lasted just 4 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, the forewoman's eyes met Andre's briefly before turning to the judge. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," she announced, her voice clear and unwavering. The courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. Kellerman's face flushed red with anger. Andre felt a wave of emotions. Relief, vindication, but most of all, a sense that something fundamental had shifted. The judgment was substantial, not just monetary damages against Kellerman and the department, but a court-ordered review of policing practices in Westbrook and mandatory reforms to training and accountability systems. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters surrounded Andre. "What's next for you?" one called out. Andre considered the question carefully before answering. This was never just about one case or one officer. It's about changing a system that protects the wrong people for the wrong reasons. That work is just beginning. In the days that followed, Andre received hundreds of messages, from congratulations to thank yous from people who had their own stories of injustice, but had never had the platform or resources to fight back. One evening, as he sorted through these messages in his home office, Tanya brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him. "Have you thought about what you said on the courthouse steps?" she asked. "About what's next?" Andre looked up at his wife, seeing in her eyes the same strength that had supported him through the darkest days of the past 3 years. "I have," he admitted. "I don't think I can go back to corporate law after this. It doesn't feel enough anymore." Tanya nodded, unsurprised. "So what will you do instead?" The idea had been forming in Andre's mind for months, but he'd hesitated to voice it aloud as if speaking it might jinx the possibility. "I want to focus on civil rights law full-time," he said finally. "Help people who've been through what I went through," and he paused. "I've been thinking about judicial appointments." Tanya raised an eyebrow. "You want to be a judge?" "Not right away," Andre clarified. "But eventually. The system needs people who understand its flaws from personal experience. People who can help fix it from the inside." The path forward wasn't easy. Andre left his comfortable partnership to start a small civil rights practice. The steady income of corporate law was replaced by the uncertainty of contingency fees and pro bono work. There were months when Tanya's income as a school administrator was all that kept their family afloat. But the work fed Andre's soul in a way his previous career never had. He represented victims of police misconduct, housing discrimination, workplace harassment, all the ways systems failed the vulnerable and marginalized. His reputation grew beyond Westbrook. Legal organizations invited him to speak at conferences. Law schools asked him to give guest lectures. A national civil rights organization appointed him to their board. Meanwhile, the reforms mandated by his lawsuit began to take effect in Westbrook. A civilian review board was established. Body cameras became mandatory. Training protocols were overhauled. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was progress. Officer Kellerman had resigned rather than comply with the new standards, moving to a smaller department in a neighboring county. Andre kept tabs on him through contacts in the legal community, making sure his history followed him. 2 years into his new practice, Andre received an unexpected phone call from State Senator Eleanor Washington. "I've been following your work," she said after introducing herself. "We need more people like you involved in our justice system reform efforts. Would you be interested in serving on the state's Judicial Nomination Commission?" The commission reviewed candidates for judicial appointments throughout the state, making recommendations to the governor. It was a volunteer position, but an influential one, a chance to help shape the future of the courts. "I'd be honored," Andre replied without hesitation. For the next year, Andre balanced his growing practice with monthly commission meetings. He approached the role with the same thoroughness and integrity that had defined his legal career, carefully evaluating each candidate's qualifications, temperament, and commitment to equal justice. At one such meeting, as they reviewed applications for a district court vacancy, Senator Washington pulled him aside during a break. "Have you ever considered applying yourself?" she asked. "The Harris County seat is opening up next month. It's not Westbrook, but it's close enough that you could still maintain your practice part-time." Andre was taken aback. "I always thought that was years down the road." "Sometimes opportunities arrive when we least expect them," the senator replied. "And frankly, our courts need voices like yours now, not years from now." That night, Andre discussed the possibility with Tanya and their children, now teenagers with their own strong opinions. "You'd be amazing, Dad," said his daughter. "You're the fairest person I know." "What about the practice?" Andre wondered aloud. "Everything we've built. You've trained good people," Tanya reminded him. "They can carry on the work while you make an even bigger difference from the bench." 2 months later, Andre submitted his application for the Harris County judgeship. The vetting process was rigorous, his entire career examined, every case scrutinized, his finances and personal life put under a microscope. When he was called for an interview with the governor, Andre knew he had made it to the final round of consideration. He prepared meticulously, ready to explain his vision for a more equitable justice system. "Mr. Wilson," the governor said after the pleasantries were done, "your qualifications are impressive, but I'm curious about something. Your own experience with the courts was challenging. Some might worry that would make you biased against law enforcement." Andre had anticipated this question. "Governor, my experience taught me firsthand how the system works and how it sometimes fails. But it also showed me how it can be improved. I don't carry anger or resentment. I carry lessons. Every person who appears in my courtroom, whether defendant or officer, prosecutor, or public defender, would receive the same fair treatment under the law." The governor nodded thoughtfully. "And what about your advocacy work? Judges must appear impartial. Being an advocate for justice and being impartial are not contradictory," Andre replied. "My commitment has always been to the fair application of the law, nothing more, nothing less. That wouldn't change on the bench." 3 weeks later, Andre received the call. He had been appointed to fill the vacant judgeship in Harris County District Court. The swearing-in ceremony was scheduled for the following month. News of his appointment spread quickly through the legal community. Congratulations poured in, along with a few grumbles from those who viewed his background with suspicion. The police union released a carefully worded statement expressing concern about his ability to be impartial in cases involving law enforcement. Andre let it all wash over him, focusing instead on the transition. He arranged for his partners to take over his active cases and prepared for his new role with characteristic thoroughness, studying recent decisions from the court and meeting with the other judges. The day before his swearing in, Andre drove to Westbrook to visit the courthouse where his journey had begun. He stood in the hallway where Kellerman had attacked him, now bustling with afternoon activity. "Look at you," came a familiar voice. It was Luis, the janitor, older now but still working his same route through the building. "I heard the news. Judge Wilson has a nice ring to it." Andre smiled. "I couldn't have done it without people like you, Luis. People brave enough to speak up." Luis shrugged modestly. "You did the hard part, standing up when everyone told you to sit down." As Andre walked back to his car, he felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with humiliation and pain in this building was closing with purpose and hope. He wasn't naive enough to think that one judgeship could fix a broken system, but it was a start. A chance to ensure that the law protected everyone equally, regardless of their power or position. What Andre didn't know as he drove home that evening was that his path would soon cross with Officer Kellerman's again, not as victim and perpetrator, but in a new dynamic that neither could have imagined 3 years earlier. The final chapter of their shared story was yet to be written, and it would test everything Andre believed about justice, mercy, and the possibility of redemption in a flawed system. The robes felt heavier than Andre expected as he put them on, for the first time in the small antechamber behind his new courtroom. The black fabric seemed to carry the weight of responsibility, of history, of all those who had stood before judges and not received the justice they deserved. "You ready, Your Honor?" asked Pamela, his newly assigned clerk, with a smile that held both respect and warmth. "Almost," Andre replied, adjusting the collar. He took a deep breath and caught his reflection in the small mirror on the wall. Judge Andre Wilson. The title still felt strange, like a coat that hadn't yet molded to his shoulders. His first day, on the bench, passed in a blur of minor cases. Traffic violations, small claims disputes, petty offenses. Andre listened carefully to each person who stood before him, treating their concerns with the same gravity whether they involved $5 or $5,000. "You're different," Pamela commented as they reviewed the next day's docket that afternoon. "Most new judges try to rush through the small stuff." Andre shook his head. "No such thing as small stuff when it's your day in court. For some of these folks, this might be their only interaction with the justice system. I want it to be fair, even if it's just a speeding ticket." In the weeks that followed, Andre settled into his new role. He established a reputation for punctuality, thorough preparation, and treating everyone in his courtroom with equal respect, from defendants to high-powered attorneys. He wasn't the youngest judge in the district, but at 45 he brought fresh energy to the bench. Word spread about Judge Wilson's courtroom, how he insisted that public defenders be given the same deference as private attorneys, how he called out prosecutors when they overreached, how he explained his rulings in plain language so that everyone could understand them. "You're making waves," warned Judge Franklin, an older colleague who had been on the bench for 20 years. "Not everyone appreciates your approach." "Is there a problem with my rulings?" Andre asked directly. Judge Franklin hesitated. "No, they're legally sound. It's more the way you're disrupting established patterns." Andre nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes patterns need disrupting, especially when they've produced inequitable results for decades." His former law partners kept him updated on developments in Westbrook. The police reforms stemming from his lawsuit continued to face resistance but were gradually taking hold. Community complaints against officers had decreased, while successful prosecutions had increased, a sign that better policing practices were leading to stronger cases. 6 months into his judgeship, Andre received a call from Chief Justice Rivera of the State Supreme Court. "Judge Wilson," she began after the pleasantries, "we have a situation in Westbrook that requires some delicacy. Judge Harrison is taking medical leave and we need someone to fill in temporarily in district court there." Andre's grip tightened on the phone. "Westbrook? I understand your history there is complicated," the Chief Justice continued, "but that's partly why I'm calling. You know the community, and more importantly, they know you. Your appointment would send a powerful message about how far things have come. Andre was silent for a moment, thinking of the courthouse where he'd been attacked, the community that had both supported and doubted him. How long would the assignment last? He finally asked. 3 months, possibly extending to 6 depending on Judge Harrison's recovery. That evening, Andre discussed the opportunity with Tanya over dinner. Their children were away at college now, leaving the house quieter than it had been in years. "Are you sure you want to go back there?" Tanya asked, concern evident in her voice. "After everything that happened?" Andre considered the question carefully. "I think I need to. Not just for me, but for everyone who followed my case, who believed that change was possible. I need to show them it wasn't just talk." The announcement of his temporary assignment to Westbrook District Court made the front page of the local paper. The headline was neutral, but the article included quotes from community leaders who expressed everything from enthusiasm to skepticism about his return. On his first morning back in the Westbrook courthouse, Andre arrived early, walking the familiar hallways that now held such different meaning. He passed the spot where Kellerman had attacked him years before. It was just a hallway now, no lingering ghosts, no flashbacks of pain or fear, just polished floors and morning light filtering through tall windows. "Welcome back, Judge Wilson," said a court officer as Andre approached his temporary chambers. Inside, a stack of files awaited him, his cases for the week. Andre settled behind the desk, the same desk where Judge Henderson had sat when Andre had appeared before him as an attorney. Life had a way of coming full circle in unexpected ways. His first few weeks in Westbrook were busy but uneventful. He handled the usual mix of criminal and civil cases, applying the same principles of fairness and clarity that had defined his approach in Harris County. Then came the day that Andre had perhaps unconsciously been preparing for since accepting the assignment. Scanning the docket for the following morning, he saw a name that sent a jolt through him. Kellerman. Not Officer Kellerman this time, but Officer Michael Reed, facing allegations of excessive force during an arrest, and listed as a witness for the defense. Richard Kellerman, now a sergeant in the neighboring Pine County Sheriff's Department. Andre set the file down carefully, his mind racing. He could recuse himself. No one would question it given their history, but something in him resisted the easy path. That night, he called Anthony Wright, who had represented him in his lawsuit years ago and had since become one of his closest friends. "If it were any other case, would you feel you could be impartial?" Anthony asked after listening to Andre's dilemma. "Yes," Andre said without hesitation. "This isn't about Kellerman. It's about whether Officer Reed violated someone's rights." "Then maybe that's your answer," Anthony replied. "But no one would blame you for stepping aside." After a restless night, Andre made his decision. He would stay on the case, but he would disclose the potential conflict to both sides and give them the opportunity to request another judge. The next morning, before calling the first case, Andre addressed the courtroom. "I need to place something on the record regarding the case of Commonwealth versus Reed. I have had previous interactions with one of the witnesses, Sergeant Kellerman, which resulted in civil litigation. If either the prosecution or defense feels this creates a conflict, I am prepared to recuse myself." The prosecutor and defense attorney conferred briefly with their clients. "Your Honor," the defense attorney began, "we appreciate your disclosure. However, we believe you can be fair in evaluating the evidence and have no objection to your continued participation." The prosecutor nodded in agreement. "The Commonwealth has no objection, Your Honor." And so the case proceeded. Officer Reed was accused of using excessive force while arresting a young black man for a minor drug offense. The prosecution had body camera footage showing Reed pushing the man's face into the pavement while he was already handcuffed and compliant. When Kellerman took the stand as a character witness for Reed, he faltered momentarily upon seeing Andre presiding. Their eyes met briefly before Kellerman looked away, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Andre felt no satisfaction at the man's discomfort, only a calm certainty that he would hear the testimony with the same impartiality he would afford any witness. This wasn't about their personal history. It was about justice for the young man whose rights had allegedly been violated. Kellerman's testimony was brief and predictable, vouching for Reed's character, suggesting the camera angle was misleading, implying the young man had been resisting in ways not captured on video. Andre listened attentively, asking clarifying questions when necessary, but giving no indication of his personal feelings. When the testimony concluded, he simply said, "Thank you, Sergeant. You may step down." The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the evidence was clear. The body camera footage, supported by witness statements, showed an unwarranted use of force. Andre delivered his verdict in measured tones, finding Officer Reed guilty of misdemeanor assault and official misconduct. "This court takes no pleasure in holding law enforcement officers accountable," Andre stated as he imposed a suspended sentence and mandatory retraining. "But the badge is a symbol of public trust, and with that comes a higher standard of conduct, not a lower one." As the courtroom cleared, Andre noticed Kellerman lingering, as if wanting to speak. But after a moment's hesitation, the sergeant turned and walked away. The Reed case marked a turning point in Andre's temporary assignment. Word spread through the department about his fair handling of the trial, how he had neither favored nor punished Reed because of personal history with Kellerman. More police misconduct cases began to be assigned to his courtroom, not because anyone was targeting officers, but because both defense attorneys and prosecutors came to trust his impartiality. Andre handled each one on its merits, sometimes ruling for officers, sometimes against them, but always based on evidence rather than bias. 2 months into what was supposed to be a 3-month assignment, Andre received another call from Chief Justice Rivera. "Judge Harrison has decided to take early retirement," she informed him. "His health issues are more serious than initially thought. The position in Westbrook is open permanently if you're interested." Andre was surprised by his own reaction, not hesitation, but a sense that this was right, that his journey had been leading him back here all along. "I'd like to apply," he said simply. The formal appointment process took several weeks, but the outcome seemed almost predetermined. Andre's performance during his temporary assignment had impressed the Judicial Selection Committee, and community support was strong. Even the police department, despite some lingering resistance, acknowledged that he had been scrupulously fair. On the day his permanent appointment was announced, Andre received an unexpected visitor in his chambers, Luis, the courthouse janitor who had been the first to tell him about Kellerman's pattern of abuse years ago. "I knew you'd be back," Luis said with a smile. "Not like this, maybe, but I knew you weren't done with Westbrook." Andre gestured for the older man to sit. "I never planned this path, Luis. It just unfolded." "That's how the important journeys go," Luis replied with the wisdom of his years. "We don't choose them. They choose us." As Luis left, Andre stood at his chamber window, looking out at the city of Westbrook, the community that had witnessed his humiliation, his fight, and now his return as a symbol of the change he had helped create. The journey wasn't over, he knew. There would be more challenges, more resistance, more work to be done. But for now he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Not triumph over Kellerman or the system that had protected him, but pride in having stayed true to his principles, even when it would have been easier to walk away. What Andre didn't know was that his path would cross with Kellerman's one more time, not in his courtroom as witness and judge, but in a more personal confrontation that would test everything he believed about justice and redemption. The final chapter of their intertwined stories was about to unfold in a way neither man could have anticipated. The autumn sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Courtroom 3, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Judge Andre Wilson reviewed the day's docket while sipping his morning coffee. After 6 months in his permanent position at Westbrook District Court, he had settled into a comfortable routine. The initial buzz around his appointment had faded, replaced by a growing reputation for fairness and thorough legal reasoning. "Your Honor," Pamela said, poking her head through the door, "there's been a last-minute addition to today's calendar. A probable cause hearing for an arrest made overnight." Andre nodded. "Add it to the end of the morning session." "What's the case?" "Commonwealth versus Brown. Possession with intent to distribute. The arresting officer was Sergeant Kellerman from Pine County, assisting in a cross-jurisdictional operation." Andre's hand paused midway to his coffee cup. "Kellerman?" "Yes, Your Honor. I can reassign it if—" "No," Andre interrupted gently. "I'll hear it. He spent the next hour preparing for the day's cases, but his mind kept returning to the upcoming hearing. In the years since their paths had last crossed, Andre had thought of Kellerman less and less. The man had become a symbol rather than a person, a reminder of what Andre had overcome rather than someone who still held power over him. The morning session proceeded efficiently. Andre moved through traffic violations, small claims disputes, and preliminary hearings with his customary attention to detail, making sure each person who stood before him felt heard, regardless of the outcome. Finally, the clerk called the last case of the morning. Commonwealth versus Brown, docket number 25 CR 7421. Andre watched as the young defendant was led in, barely 20 years old, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. His public defender looked harried, files clutched haphazardly under one arm. And then came Kellerman, walking with the confident stride of someone who expected the system to work in his favor. Their eyes met briefly as Kellerman took his position at the prosecutor's table. There was a flicker of something in the officer's gaze, not quite hostility, but a guarded wariness. The Commonwealth charges Mr. Brown with possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, began the prosecutor. Sergeant Kellerman made the arrest last night during a coordinated operation between Pine County and Westbrook Police Departments. Andre nodded. Sergeant, please describe the circumstances of the arrest. Kellerman stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, at approximately 11:30 p.m. last night, I observed the defendant making what appeared to be a hand-to-hand transaction near the corner of Elm and 4th Street. Upon approaching to investigate, I noticed a strong odor of marijuana. When questioned, the defendant became evasive. A search revealed 3 baggies of what field tested as marijuana and a small quantity of pills believed to be MDMA. As Kellerman spoke, Andre observed him closely, not the words, which were standard police testimony, but the man himself. There was gray at his temples now, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He delivered his testimony with practiced efficiency, but without the swagger Andre remembered. And was the defendant advised of his rights before questioning? Andre asked. Yes, Your Honor, Kellerman replied. The public defender rose. Your Honor, my client disputes the officer's account. He says he was simply walking home when Sergeant Kellerman stopped him without cause. Furthermore, he claims the search was conducted without consent or probable cause. Andre turned to the young defendant. Mr. Brown, is that your understanding of events? The young man looked up, surprised at being addressed directly by the judge. Yes, sir, I mean, Your Honor. I was just walking home from my cousin's place. I didn't do any hand-to-hand nothing. He just came up and started searching me. Andre considered the conflicting accounts. This early in the process, with limited evidence before him, his role was not to determine guilt, but whether there was probable cause to proceed with the charges. Sergeant Kellerman, Andre said, what specifically led you to believe you were witnessing a drug transaction? Kellerman shifted slightly. The defendant's behavior, Your Honor, the furtive movements, the brief interaction with another individual who quickly left the scene. Did you identify yourself as law enforcement before approaching? Yes, Your Honor. And you're certain the defendant was advised of his rights prior to any questioning? A brief hesitation. Yes, Your Honor. Andre noted the pause. It was slight, but it was there. After years in courtrooms, first as an attorney and now as a judge, he had developed an ear for the subtle cadences of testimony, the almost imperceptible hesitations that often signaled uncertainty or untruth. Mr. Brown, Andre continued, do you recall Sergeant Kellerman identifying himself as an officer before approaching you? Yes, Your Honor. And were you informed of your rights before being questioned? Brown glanced at his attorney, then back at Andre. No, sir. He just started asking what I was doing, who I'd been talking to. Then he searched me. He didn't read me no rights until after he found the stuff. The pattern was familiar, an officer's word against a defendant's, with procedural corners possibly cut in the process. In thousands of courtrooms across the country, judges automatically sided with law enforcement in such situations. But Andre had not become a judge to perpetuate that pattern. I'll take a brief recess to review the arrest report, Andre announced. Court will resume in 15 minutes. In his chambers, Andre studied the paperwork carefully. The report was thorough but contained inconsistencies, small ones that might normally go unnoticed. The timeline of the arrest didn't quite align with when rights were supposedly administered. The description of what constituted probable cause was vague. When court resumed, Andre had made his decision. Based on the evidence before me, I find insufficient probable cause to support the charge of possession with intent to distribute. The possession charge may proceed, but I am reducing bail to a personal recognizance bond. The prosecutor began to object, but Andre continued. Additionally, I am ordering a review of the arrest procedures in this case. Sergeant Kellerman, please remain after court is adjourned. Mr. Brown, you are released pending trial on the lesser charge. Next case. When the courtroom had cleared, Andre gestured for Kellerman to approach the bench. The officer did so with visible reluctance. Your Honor, Kellerman began defensively. I followed department protocols. Andre held up a hand. This isn't about the case, Sergeant. Not entirely. Kellerman fell silent, confusion replacing his defensiveness. 5 years ago, Andre continued quietly, you and I stood in this same building, but in very different positions. You abused your authority then, and today I'm concerned you may have done so again. Though in a less violent way. Kellerman's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I could refer this for departmental review, Andre said. There would be an investigation, possibly disciplinary action. Are you threatening me? Kellerman asked, his voice low. Andre shook his head. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice I wish someone had offered you years ago before your behavior escalated to physical assault. Kellerman looked away, then back at Andre. What choice? The Pine County Sheriff's Department has a newly established community policing program. Officers work directly with neighborhood groups, build relationships, focus on prevention rather than arrests. It's voluntary, but I understand they're looking for experienced officers to participate. Kellerman's brow furrowed. You want me to join some community outreach program? As what, punishment? Not punishment. Growth. Andre leaned forward slightly. You have 20 years of experience, Sergeant. That's valuable. But how you apply that experience matters. You can continue as you have been, cutting corners, viewing certain citizens as the enemy, or you can try a different approach. And if I don't, then I proceed with the referral for review of today's arrest. And I'll be watching every case you bring into my courtroom with particular attention to detail. Kellerman was silent for a long moment. Why would you give me any chance at all? After what happened? It was a fair question. One Andre had asked himself while reviewing the arrest report. The answer had come to him not as a judge or as a victim, but simply as a man who had seen too much damage done by cycles of retaliation and retribution. Because this was never about you and me, Andre replied. It's about the system we both serve in different ways. I didn't fight to change that system just to perpetuate its worst aspects once I gained some power within it. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. The choice is yours, Sergeant. I don't need your answer now. Think about it. Kellerman nodded stiffly before turning to leave. At the door he paused. You could have had me fired back then. Why didn't you? Andre considered the question. Because firing one officer doesn't fix a broken system. And despite everything I believed the system could be fixed, I still do. After Kellerman left, Andre sat alone in the empty courtroom, the weight of the encounter settling around him. He had expected to feel something. Vindication, perhaps, or the righteous satisfaction of having turned the tables on someone who had once humiliated and hurt him. Instead, he felt only a quiet certainty that he had done what justice required. No more, no less. 2 weeks later, as Andre was leaving the courthouse, he spotted a familiar figure on the steps speaking with a group of teenagers. Kellerman was out of uniform, dressed in plain clothes, gesturing animatedly as the young people listened with varying degrees of interest. As Andre approached, he caught fragments of their conversation, something about a basketball program, opportunities for job training, alternatives to the street economy. Kellerman noticed him and nodded in acknowledgement. There was no warmth in the gesture, but no hostility either, just the basic respect of one professional for another. Andre returned the nod and continued down the steps. They would likely never be friends, never fully reconcile the past, but something had shifted, not just between them, but in the larger pattern they were both part of. 3 months later, Andre received a report on his desk, the first quarterly assessment of Pine County's community policing initiative. Among the officers listed as participants was Sergeant Richard Kellerman. His community satisfaction ratings were middle of the pack, Not stellar, but improving month over month. A note from the program coordinator mentioned his unexpected dedication to working with at-risk youth. Andre filed the report away with a small smile. The system was changing, slowly but surely. Not because one black man had become a judge or because one officer had moderated his approach, but because people throughout the community, from courthouse janitors to chief justices, from community activists to police officers, had committed to making it change. That evening, as Andre walked through the courthouse parking lot, he passed a memorial that had been installed the previous year, a simple plaque commemorating the civil rights struggle in Westbrook and those who had fought for equal justice. His name wasn't on it, nor did he wish it to be. The real monument was all around him, in the civilian review board that now oversaw police complaints, in the diverse faces of the new class of officers, in courtrooms where defendants were increasingly treated with dignity, regardless of their race or resources. As he drove home through the streets of Westbrook, Andre reflected on the long, unlikely journey that had brought him here. From a beaten man in a courthouse hallway to the judge who now administered justice in that same building. The symmetry might have seemed like poetic justice in a simpler story, but Andre knew better. Real justice wasn't about personal vindication or comeuppance. It was about creating systems that treated everyone with equal dignity and held everyone to the same standards, even those who had once seemed beyond accountability. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Anthony Wright, his former attorney and now a close friend. "Just checking in," Anthony said. "Heard you had an interesting case with our old friend Kellerman a while back." Andre smiled. "News travels fast. Small legal community. Word is you cut him some slack." "I applied the law as I would for anyone else," Andre replied. "No more, no less." Some would say he didn't deserve that consideration. Andre pulled into his driveway, thinking about Anthony's comment. It was never about what he deserved. It was about who I want to be as a judge, as a man. There was a moment of silence before Anthony chuckled. "And that, my friend, is why you're sitting on the bench while I'm still arguing in front of it." After they hung up, Andre sat in his car for a moment longer. Through the window, he could see Tanya moving about in their kitchen, preparing dinner. Their youngest child was home from college for the weekend. The porch light was on, welcoming him home. This was what it had all been for, he realized. Not the title or the robes or even the power to hold others accountable. It had been for this, the chance to help build a community where justice wasn't just an ideal but a daily practice, where his children could live without the fears that had shadowed his own youth, where even those who had once abused their power could find a path to redemption if they were willing to walk it. As Andre finally stepped out of his car and walked toward his front door, he felt the weight of his journey, not as a burden, but as the solid foundation upon which he now stood. The past hadn't been erased, but it had been transformed, stone by painful stone, into something that could support a better future. And in the end, that was the most profound justice of all.